Today, we're diving into a landmark law from Chile that's sparking a massive conversation about what a safe and respectful workplace should even look like. It's called Ley Karin, or the Karin Law. And believe me, this is about way more than just new rules. It's about human dignity.
This quote, wow, it's not just some academic observation. It's a heartbreaking summary of the tragedy that lit the fuse for a whole national movement. It draws a straight, undeniable line from hostility at work to the most devastating possible outcome. So, who was Karin? Her name was Karin Salgado. She was a nurse. In 2019, she was a witness in an internal investigation at her hospital. She wasn't the one accused of anything, she just did the right thing. And for that, she was punished severely. We're talking mistreatment, suspension, a pay cut. They basically isolated her professionally. The harassment got so bad that on November 12, 2019, she took her own life. Her story just sent a shockwave across the entire country, and she became this tragic symbol of a system that completely failed to protect its people.
Now, a law this big doesn't just appear out of thin air. It really stands on the shoulders of decades of struggle. As you can see here, Chile had been building this legal framework piece by piece since the 90s. But Karina Salgado's death, happening right as international standards on workplace violence were gaining momentum, created this final urgent push that was absolutely needed for real comprehensive change.
Okay, so we've talked about the why. Now let's get into the what. What does this law actually do? It's officially known as Lee 21643, and it's the government's formal response to the kind of systemic failure that Karin's case brought to light. Here's the most important part. The law makes prevention the #1 goal. It says that all employers, public and private, doesn't matter, must have a formal written protocol to prevent, investigate, and punish harassment and violence. Having a plan is no longer just a nice idea. It's the law.
And the effect was, well, it was immediate and absolutely staggering. In just the first 5 months after the law went into effect, more than 21,000 complaints were filed. Think about that. That number doesn't just show that people are using the law, it reveals the true scale of a problem that had been festering in the dark for who knows how long. The floodgates just burst open.
But look, passing a law is one thing. Actually changing people's behavior, that's a whole other ballgame. So how have companies really responded on the ground? Well, it's complicated. You're seeing this whole spectrum of reactions, from genuine adoption to, let's say, cynical resistance.
Researchers basically found 5 different camps. First, you have the precursors, the ones who are already ahead of the game. Then there are the in-transition companies who are really trying to adapt and learn. After that, you get the compliers. They're just ticking the boxes to avoid getting fined. And then it gets more concerning. You've got the resistors, who actually see the law as an attack on their authority. And finally, there are the small and medium-sized companies that might want to do the right thing, but just don't have the resources.
And this gets to the absolute core of the challenge. A study found that while 81% of companies now have the required written protocol, a huge number of them admit it's not actually part of their day-to-day operations. It's a document sitting in a drawer, not a living, breathing practice. This is what they call the protocol paradox, having the rules on paper but failing to build the culture.
So, this paradox, it leads directly to the next big finding. The law has unintentionally created new fears, new tensions, and a lot of systemic roadblocks that are slowing down real progress and, frankly, causing a lot of friction for everybody. At the heart of all that friction is this fundamental question that tons of leaders and managers are wrestling with. Is this law a tool to protect my people, or is it a threat to my ability to lead?
This quote just nails the anxiety perfectly. Interviewees describe this feeling of "viene el lobo," the wolf is coming. It's this fear among some managers. They're worried about false accusations, that they can't give direct feedback anymore, that any tough management call could be twisted into a harassment claim. And that fear, it can make leaders pull back, avoid tough conversations, and actually hurt the workplace dynamic. And on top of that fear, you've got these major systemic problems. First off, the government agency that handles these cases, it's completely overwhelmed, which means huge delays.
Then there's the reality for small businesses. They often can't afford the training and support they need. It gets even more confusing when different agencies have conflicting rules. And practically speaking, trying to implement a simple protection measure, like separating the accuser and the accused, well, that can be almost impossible in a small office.
Okay, so with all those hurdles, you might be thinking this is all just a giant mess. But it's not that simple. Because despite the headaches, the report uncovered some really clear signs that a genuine cultural shift is starting to happen.
3 really big positive changes are starting to pop up. First, what they call a new ethic of care, where an employee's well-being is finally being treated as a serious business concern. Second, a new focus on systemic prevention, where companies are being forced to learn from every incident to stop it from happening again. And third, and this one is huge, is the denormalization of microaggressions. It's finally challenging that old excuse of, oh, it was just a joke.
I mean, this quote from an interviewee pretty much says it all. For the first time in a lot of workplaces, how people actually feel when they come to work, the quality of their daily interactions, is becoming a real metric for success. The law has made it okay, even necessary, to have these conversations in a way nothing else ever could.
So where does all this leave us? Well, the Karin Law is obviously not a magic wand. It's a messy, complicated, challenging process. But the source material makes one thing crystal clear. A law like this is never the finish line. It's the starting pistol for a long, necessary cultural marathon. So I guess the real question it leaves us with is, now that the race has started, who's actually willing to run it?